from the Northern Cluster, ministers, and all other fellowships. I think this medicine will show valid guarantee. Good evening, a number of our Majesty President Army. I think they make adult abuse.
Yes. Yes.
At its best.
Yes.
And Serena the routine, and part of the routine, some of us are supposed to be sleeping by now. And we are the last to speak. Mariah is neither here nor there. And I'm going in summary. And part of the summary that I'll be speaking upon, I was just writing some couple of people because we were speaking. And the scripture in Exodus, there's two things actually that scripture. And I know that we're focused on the one part of it, but actually it's two of them. The first part, it indicates for it now by to wait for almost 3 months. And it came to a point during for that period of time. Then the next option kicks in. And the next option indicated to a basket. The Chinese are referring to Barashas as a symbol of resilience and adaptability and the ability to thrive in difficult conditions. The ability to thrive in difficult conditions. The Bible makes reference of the ark in different forms. But two particular ark is the ark of Noah and the one for Moses. But both ark resonate out of as a hiding place. Noah built the ark so that him and his family and the entire species on male and female can hide in that ark for the storm to come. Moses was hidden in a basket so that he can be saved from death. So there are the similarities. But out of the reeds and the rushes, there is another component. It says a bitumen, which means scottish. To seal and to cement the basket. And I think that component is also important because there are a couple of ingredients that were used, not only just one. But also it also means that there is a place where everybody must hide when the tough gets tougher. And the ark is a symbol of that hidden place or a hibernation. There were cats, there were birds, and last time I was reading about one of them. That flies from South Africa to Finland, non-stop. And it sleeps while it's flying. Because the environment in South Africa are no longer conducive because of the climate change. So from time to time, it moves seasonally. So when it goes to Finland, it's because the climate at that time and that place is now better and more conducive. So the base knows where to fly to find comfort. But let me bring it closer. And I'm sure any one of you, or like I go KFC, go McDonald's, go Chicken Licken. But the tricky part is, there are 3 windows. The first one is the speaker. You go to the speaker, you speak to the speaker. And there is a voice that emanated, comes out of that speaker. Can you please place an order? And you go, you can have a twist meal with Coca-Cola. You don't even see the person.
Okay.
But you trust that you're talking to somebody.
Yes.
Why is it AI? But somehow you believe that there is a person on the other side. And you place it on. You then move to the next window. You pay for something that you don't actually take a guarantee that you will get. But you still pay. Then you go to the third window, hoping that you will collect your meal. And what if when you get there, there's no meal? You have already paid. So the point I'm driving at is, if you are able to trust the windows of KFC, McDonald's, and Chicken Licken, why not are you able to trust God? As the cornerstone of your life. So the idea is simple that you can still trust God in the midst of trials and tribulations. Even if you can't see Him, but His presence will always be felt. I mean, it's too late. Because whenever I found my son, Maratanasa will have and try to make me out of it. I think the baseline in the journey of being a youth, and I'm saying so because I was a youth, at some point, I actually started the youth in Alexander, 1992 there. But the baseline for a successful youth is about the praying youth. Once you set the foundation, being a prayerful youth, that becomes the beginning. And that will then be followed by commitment and dedication in the work of the youth fellowship and of the church in general. You can't be one-sided and say, I'm in the fellowship, but while in the church, you are inactive. There has to be a strike, so you must strike a balance between the work in the fellowship and what you do in the church. Because in any way, before you go to the fellowship, you become a member of the church first. So the balance is necessary. Number one. But the second point that goes to it, when you grow out of your space, you then create fellowship. And part of the fellowship is like now as you have, which is the Northern cluster. So that takes you out of your comfort zone and you start to allow yourself to learn from others with the intention that it enhances you spiritually and otherwise. So it's part of the journey of growth. But not only that, but also with fellowships that exist within the boundaries of the presbytery. And I'm sure you know I've always been the advocate that you cannot be a fellowship in isolation outside other fellowships. That if all fellowships within the presbytery, you need each other in order to grow. You can't go independently outside the other. And every time my philosophy is always bring me to the right conclusion. And I remember 4 years ago, when I was doing a road show, I said, please fellowship, when you go in to any other fellowship, don't go in on the basis of fraternal greetings. Go in as a base of support for that particular fellowship. So don't send a delegate of 1 or 2 people and give a fraternal and leave. Because somewhere along the journey of the fellowship, you are going to need one another to strengthen each other. And one of the typical examples is next year, the national conference is coming of Fellowship of Men. And now the reality is kicking in that for men to hold the conference, they can't do it alone. They need all other fellowships to work together as a team, because it's no longer about the fellowship, it's about the church in general. And sooner or later, the national youth will come in. And therefore will then receive letters requesting for donation. Now because there's an announcement made. But there is a better way of preparing many of the occasions and the events before they even announced. When we work as a team, and when we work as partners, and we work together as fellowships. So that we are not only fellowship when it's convenient. I don't only need you when you want to help me throughout the conference, but that we need each other for fellowshipping, even beyond the conferences, even beyond the convocations. And you know that I've always been very harsh to you. But the intention of my harshness was not to destroy you, but was to continue to advise you. That as long as you upset yourself from the overall activities of the church in terms of planning and thinking and strategic direction, you are automatically isolating yourself from the bigger family of God, which is the presbytery. And that will lead me to the next issue on leadership. But I'll come to that at some point. For any presbytery or any convocation at a national level, for the national to remain strong, it means presbyteries must be strong. For presbyteries to be strong, it means congregation must be strong. You can't have a strong presbytery if congregations are weak. So the strength must always be from bottom up, not top down. And I'm sure we have been helping. Some of the help from the churches or from ministers are not necessarily in terms of attending, but it's in terms of encouraging the youth at their branch level to participate in the activities of the youth. And that could be another kind of support. So we should not look at support from one-sided, but we must look at it broadly so. And I'll give you an example. In my congregation, every time I'm actually forcing them that as soon as you pass catechism, you go straight to the youth. It's a non-negotiable point. Because we don't want to create a gap. It's not the same with high school, say, oh, but don't get gap here. Don't create a gap here. You move from one to the next. From Sunday school to youth, up until, by the way, up until to minister. So therefore, for the youth to grow, they require certain pillars. And one of the pillars that they need is spiritual pillar as a base. But then the spiritual pillar must be followed by an emotional pillar. Because we are now young people competing against each other, hating one another without doing anything. It just comes naturally. And therefore, you need to rise above emotionally. And that is called emotional intelligence. But sometimes you need to know where to keep quiet and what to say. But you also need a psychological pillar. The ability to comprehend the process of growth amongst your peers and how you isolate yourself amongst your peers. But then again, you need a physical pillar. And I'll tell you what, the of the youth is very key. Because if the youth are not preserved, then it means we don't have leadership. It means you cannot live recklessly without preserving who you are. And the preservation of you, who you are, it secures the church to continue to exist. And the social component. And it further says, so it is therefore very important to embrace whether, and part of the recruitment and the drive is not because you belong to the same church, but in essence, the Christ in you must resonate to a point that when somebody who does not go to church, when they look at you, they are attracted and want to be part of you. So we can't just attract one another. Because the forces are outside where we must bring them inside. And the next part is the economical pillar. The problem with the economical pillar is many of the youth are unemployed. And we are unemployed because the economy itself is not growing in a way that it propels young people to find employment. For the record, in the fact, or in civil totality, the unemployment of young people is 64%. So anyone who's not working falls under the statistics of 64%. That's the biggest majority. It's the same number every year, but in percentage. And remember, youth are the majority. So the majority of the youth in Enfuleni, 64% of the minority. And there are no prospects that will ever work unless they change the truth and they create a paradigm shift and start thinking outside the box. And that's the challenge I'm bringing to you. We cannot only sing Moyana, Dohaba, and without addressing the issues that condemns the spirit. And some of the issues that condemns the spirit are the social ills and the economical deficiencies that affect the young people. One of the reasons why we have uniform was so that we don't have to compete with each other, so that we look common and the same. So that the peer pressure is not too much to some of the young people because they cannot afford it. And that's one of the reasons about it. Because now it creates commonality out of all the youth. So it is now important that John Kabaj and within the leadership that we have created, that we have elected, and those that will be elected, those that are actually existing, that part of your work is not only about singing and praising. Yes, that is the base. But outside that base, you still need the wall and you still need the roofing. And part of the walls and the roofing is to create opportunities for young people. Because if you don't do that, this is what's going to happen. They are going to move out looking for greener pastures. And eventually the number of people being stable or dwindling because many comes in as they are about to, they have to move out and go look for opportunities. So you don't have a program of retainment because there's nothing to retain. But also, they get captured by the outside world that promises them the best. Because there is a seed in the church they can't go beyond. So, it's not only about looking for an employment, it's about also creating an economic opportunities. And I know you're not very good at that. I spoke about this with the National Committee of Women last year at the airport, and I've spoken about it with the men in our press meeting. And one of the questions I even asked the women at that point in time was, why should we always go out and hire halls on behalf of the church for our assemblies, for our national conferences, and why can't we build our own and generate revenue? We are empowering the Methodists, the Lutheran, the Anglican. So we have so much that we just want to give, and we can't receive, and we can't build our own. So it can't be correct. And I've been saying it to the women, sometimes it's better to apologize than to ask permission. Because the likeliness when you get permission, you ask for permission, you are going to be asked questions.